I'll do the opening. So we're back again at MMS, and this time I'm with Nathan, Mike and Robert, and we're just going to talk a little bit about our experiences at MMS 2016, and in general what the value of MMS is when we consider cloud versus enterprise desktop. What's your take on the experience so far for the crowd? Is it mostly enterprise or is it cloud focused, and what in the cloud do you see people actually interested in?
Well, for us, what we've seen is that as people have been looking at the cloud as a legitimate option for them in their business, and as they've seen the cadence of which they're releasing capabilities to their customers increase, they're trying to release value faster and faster, they're seeing the cloud as something that they are looking to get on board with and understand how they can receive more value from it. So our sessions this week were really focused around how in a DevOps lifecycle, that the theme of DevOps, has enabled a lot of the professionals at MMS to be able to better serve their customers by releasing value faster by using technologies that are available within the cloud to be able to increase the cadence of taking value and taking requests from their customers and delivering the result of that value to their customers through automated release management and DevOps processes and infrastructure as code technologies. And I've seen a lot more interest in that than I have in previous years. I think in previous years when we've talked about those, it was really early in the bell curve. People were just sort of exploring those technologies. And now I'm seeing that people are legitimately not only just playing with them, but actually implementing them in production and wanting to understand how they can make it real within their business.
Yeah, I've spoken mostly together with Thomas on what's still called on-premises solutions. We're talking about Hyper-V, we're talking about Nano Server now, very interesting new technology, containers. But what we try to tell them as well is, while you might start with this all on premises, and most people, I think, their focus is still on premises, and then maybe some use cases going to the cloud. It's what you do today, the layer you build today with these technologies will be usable in the cloud as well, making you agile, giving you the possibility, we've got it here, but if necessary, we can move over there and back depending on your needs. And we see that there's interest, but there's still less than, as you said, last year, but I think there's still a lot of confusion around this. What should we do here? What are case studies? And from my point of view, people are really too much focused, and I kind of not blame the people for that. I kind of blame more the marketing machines out there and those industry experts that telling what's happening, is that they're really too focused on, we've got this production and we need to move that production to the cloud because we've been told it's cheaper, it's faster, we'll have less work to do, and so on and so forth. But what I try to tell as well, with all these new technologies, you should also look at other different type of use cases where the cloud can help you. And a few examples I foresee, for example, one is when you ask audience, how many times did you ever test your disaster recovery plan? And we all know the typical answer, right? Once a year, maybe a few hands, once a month, silence in the room. Why is that? No resources, no men to do it, no manpower to do it, and so on. On the other hand, those resources are literally there available if you can leverage those resources because you're using the same technology on premises as you're going to use in the cloud. That would be a great case study.
Does that not also have a fear factor in it, though, that if I actually run through a disaster recovery process, that I may affect my production, and I can't afford to affect production because we've got critical workloads at this point in time, so let's do the test later and essentially continually put it off?
Yeah, that is indeed certainly one of these arguments, and again, that's why those cloud resources become very interesting. If you look at the new Azure Resource Manager, I probably can't say new anymore because it goes so fast, but compared to the classical model, and you really have to build all these little building blocks to come to that environment, then quarantining that environment to make it possible without interfering with production just became easy.
Right. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot that, as people are understanding the idea of infrastructure as code and how that changes, people look at just saying, I've got infrastructure on premise, I want to move it to the cloud. They're sort of sort of missing the point of the cloud, in a way, right? Which is that.
That's a fair point. But do you not find that people that have infrastructure in their existing data centers, they have teams that have been trained on how to manage the storage arrays, the network services, the compute that's already there, procedures and processes that they have essentially evolved into. And when you suggest to them now that they would want to start embracing a cloud methodologies, it's as if you're telling them you need to nearly go back to step one and start learning all over again. And there's a no thanks.
They really are,
moment.
though. I mean, at the end of the day, they are going back to step one because the concepts are the same. The concepts, the themes of resources that they need to provision are similar, but how you go about doing that and the result of how you go about doing it is much different. Like, instead of me creating a Visio diagram that never gets updated and contains the specifications that get spun up in a data center 2 weeks later after I request them, I'm creating a file that tells the cloud what to provision that moment. And then interior to that, I'm layering in configurations of those things. I'm creating a completely redeployable infrastructure.
And that's a really good benefit. But what are you seeing from the teams on the ground who essentially have to take their mindset away from working in Visio and writing these new infrastructure documents, writing these deployment scripts for Chef, for DSC or Octopus? Are these guys embracing? Is it a new bleed of people being hired into the teams to help them do this? How is that working?
Not yet. And you have to understand the point of view of these people, right? I mean, we all know, we play with it. You are massively awesome with this kind of things. But they have a day-to-day job, which means if they have to change the way they work, it requires new studying, whether we like it or not. It's the same concept, but still they have to change their mindset. They need to have that time. Today, what we see is a lot of stress on IT environments, even big shops, small shops, whatever, to keep running what is running. They can't take that there. Now, you can bring in consultants, you can bring in other people to do this, but the problem is at a certain point in time, these consultants or these other people are either going away or get replaced or whatever happens, and then it dies again. I strongly believe the day we can do exactly the approach of the way you provision, which you showed this week a couple of times, which is great. If we can do that exact same thing, take that code, if I can call it code, and do the exact same thing on premises, and it is coming, then we indeed going to see that step, because now a lot of people are thinking, yeah, that's nice, I love it, I've seen demos of it, it looks fantastically, but why would I spend that much time in creating something which I can't do yet on premises?
So
it needs to come together.
You're leading in towards something like the Azure Stack at this point when you talk about those things. Okay.
Well, the thing I see a lot of, and also had a lot of discussion regarding here on MMS, is that people are now more accepting it when it comes to understanding that their business is actually built up of different technologies, like you, Nathan, spoke of, and you also, Mike, and they're more, like Lego blocks, build up the different technology that should be providing the actual business service, and being more acceptable to the cloud concept, like Azure, when it comes to building a disaster recovery solution or simple, DR or backup restore. People are more into that now, and they're more open-minded to it. But still, from my point of view, what I heard, maybe you guys don't agree with me. You not often do that, but maybe you do it now. I don't know.
We'll see, Albert.
Is that I lost track.
That's okay. So let me ask you another question. So, right, with the different presentations you guys have been doing during the course of the week, most of those presentations, I think it's fair to say, have been data center and cloud focused.
Oh yeah.
So, from the attendance going into those presentations, how have you seen the numbers in comparison to last year? So, for example, you would be very strong on doing backup and disaster recovery type services, where Mike, you talked about the containerization of these resources, and of course, you've got the DevOps piece of the house all sorted up, and I've been focusing a lot more on the Azure Stack. And then the other one that sits outside all of those is obviously the automation piece. Are you seeing the numbers that have been at your presentations rise this year? Is there more interest, or is the engagement pulling in to say that people are starting to embrace these?
This year is foremost the most amazing year at MMS, because this is my first year. so I have nothing to compare with.
Fair enough. That's two of us actually.
Cool.
It's amazing because
Make that 3.
Well, seriously. Okay, well there you go. That was not a very well thought out question.
But still, there's one thing that is very important, and I think it's a good discussion also, because what I see compared with when I've been delivering a session at TechEd or Ignite or whatever, MMS is where people actually can ask questions, and
Robert, it's not can, do.
Yeah, and I love it. Yeah,
it's brilliant.
And it is brilliant. And the fact that people are saying that, all right, Robert, you're saying something on stage. My point of view is this, and we have a discussion right in the session. We like pause the session and we discuss that. We can discuss that for 5 or 15 minutes, and everyone is engaged in that discussion. And if you run out of time, we go outside in the hall and continue.
I think it's probably good just to acknowledge to people that haven't attended MMS before, like the three of us, the format is definitely different in that we have 1 hour of essentially presentation, but we have an additional 45 minutes that we can take at the end or in the middle or at any point in time to actually discuss and go in depth. And that's definitely something that MMS has offered that I've never experienced before. And it's been amazing.
It is a very good thing, because me and you guys also as a presenter, I think you guys agree with me on this for once, right? That it feels really good to have the time to say, hey, I will listen to you, we will discuss, we will go with this discussion and sort it out. So you will be satisfied, and all that knowledge sharing will be spread out to the other audience members. Yep. And that is super.
I enjoy the fact this is in a marketing conference. It has a very community driven feel to it.
Yeah.
And that lets you be much more open as a speaker, and it lets you have much more collaborative conversations when you're doing your presentations. Yeah. And you can challenge your audience. I think one of the things that you were bringing up, Damian, is this idea that people are challenged by the cloud. They're almost sometimes to a certain extent scared by the cloud. How does this impact what I do? Like you mentioned, like if I do nothing, if I do server provisioning and hardware, and how does that impact the way I work and the way I act in my daily work? And Robert, in your session, you made a really great comment about, hey, does everybody agree that technology is changing and technology is going to continue to change? So what a conference like this really does is it asks the people, the attendants, to step up, put their big boy pants on, and realize that the technology is going to change and they need to evolve with it.
Yeah.
There's going to be new things they need to learn. There's a new way of acting within IT, and they're expected to evolve along with it, or it's going to pass them by. And that's why you see so many development organizations adopting things like infrastructure as code, adopting things like ARM, and the infrastructure groups are now kind of catching up to that. And if they don't catch up to it, they're going to find that their skills are becoming less relevant. This kind of conference enables them to become more relevant.
I'm not 100% agreeing with that. I agree with the point where you see technology goes fast and they need to update. But what I've seen this year more than other years, because I do a lot of conferences on a yearly basis and a lot of community conferences as well, is people start to understand it. That's true. But there's still a lot of pressure from different sides, and they're not yet adapting. That could be because their company is still heavily working in silos, where you still have the storage guys say, don't even think about touching my storage. The network guys, leave me alone. And now suddenly there's this where they don't have control anymore. But I've spoken the last few months a lot to C-level persons that are still in that 10 years ago pattern, saying, what do you mean one group of guys building this as code? No. My team exists out of storage guys, network guys, and and virtualization administrators. And if the virtualization administrator needs something, he can do a request, which takes 2 weeks to go through the cycle. The same for the network and so on. And it's not only going to be the mindset of the people that we have behind us here and in the different rooms. It's going to be that upper level management that we need to take as well, because if they don't want to change this, if they want to keep working as is, because hey, it worked for us the last 10 years,
but
it's going to get it. Yeah,
there's a disjoint here though, where the C levels that are running the IT and development teams, while they're aligned with the business requirements, they are also listening to some of these buzzwords of doing things like DevOps. And for some of the examples that I think are showing why we're failing here is that nobody's really embracing this within some of these enterprises and organizations where the IT leadership or the dev leaderships are all kind of saying here, yeah, it's great, but they're never going to pull it off, and the same feelings on the other side. So the C levels are essentially saying, A, B, and C, you're going to be the DevOps team. Let's see how it runs, and if it works, then we'll add more people into that team. And I think there's a complete failure to actually structure that correctly and allow that become an inherent methodology of working rather than it's another team. And it isn't another team. It is completely a top-down rewrite of the way we run our enterprises.
Well, that's when it comes to the people who are sort of stuck inside of an organization, it really comes down to them taking control of their own career. I mean, think about any of us in this room, right? Would you let yourself be stuck inside of an organization that's not going to enable you to follow the most important technologies that you need to be? No, we're not.
Most certainly not.
And if you're a person who's taking control of your career and you go out and you're either driving, your CIO knows this is important, right? Unless they're about to get fired. They know this is important. So if you've got a person on your team that's taking control of their career and advancing it in the cloud era, and they're not able to do it in your organization, there's plenty of other businesses that want that person.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We're from Europe, right? Taking this step, I mean, we probably have the luxury, the four of us, to say, hey guys, to our bosses, if you're not jumping on this, bye-bye, I'm out of here, I'll find something else. But I think many people don't have that luxury, especially not in certain areas of the world, and they're very happy what they are, and if they need to be doing what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, they will keep doing it. And I think the pain there as well. I'm saying the same thing. Why would you stop advancing your career or your study or that new technology? And we're all hungry for it, right? We're technicians. We're all hungry for it. Why would you keep if your boss doesn't want or your bosses don't allow this? And then, well, it's not that simple. So I do still believe that from a C level, the push needs to come more, and not just like I heard something at Gartner or IDC or whatever. No. Do it. No. This needs to become part of any company culture.
Totally. Yeah. Any top down, an organization looking to transform requires, in order for it to truly be effective, requires a top down message, right?
Trust. And a trust.
Trust.
There has to be trust in there, because if the developer manager doesn't trust the IT manager, and they're afraid that when he turns his back, that when this next sprint fails to deliver, that I'm going to blame him to the CIO above me or whoever the case is, then it's not going to work either. It has to be trust from the whole way.
And you're true, and that's absolutely correct. And taking that back just a little bit, where in the discussion where we discussed more or less understanding the business. And the thing I see when I go out there and do some business continuity for companies, and that's on a global scale, see that all over, is that when you break down the actual business services and you realize and you do the math of the actual cost, and sometimes you can do the math for Azure, sometimes you cannot. That's what we call challenge. But when you summarize all that and you have the money that sort of more or less control the actual choice of technology, people are looking at Azure or cloud services, and they are adapting it. And in some cases, as Mike says, no, they're not, because there are good cases saying that they shouldn't, right? But the progress, if I look back, and I'm glad to hear your opinion about this, Jens, but if we look back like 3 years compared to now, I would say that the world, actually, the companies out there are more cloud adaptive, are more into the cloud. Of course, there's still challenges, and there will be always challenges. The thing is how you cope with them, right? Mm-hmm. How you build that scenario, how you make that concept applicable for the business, right? So, do you guys agree that we are seeing an improvement, an advancement when it comes to consuming cloud services?
But I always ask the same question, maybe a good question for you guys. When I talk to these people is, what are your drivers to change your behavior? What is the cases that you're using to start, for example, with looking at this, as infrastructure as a code, by using cloud resources, combining it with on-premises maybe? What are the real drivers in companies? Where do they start with?
I think working in an enterprise, that's an awful easy question to answer, because effectively what I'm looking at and I'm 20 years with the current employer, the attrition of people coming through the environment where they've learned a process, they've become very good at that, and they have now a skill that they can take to the market and move forward. That leaves a gap for me, because now I've got to figure out, how did you do that? How can I repeat that process, and how can I backfill it? And I'm spending more time retraining and going back, and there's a huge cost on this. Taking the cloud approach, writing that infrastructure as code, doing desired state, automating processes, means that I can take that engineer that knows what he's doing, get him to automate that process with me. He may not be able to script, but somebody is, and we can sit together and make that happen. And then he becomes free to focus on more things and get even more knowledge, making him even more worthy. But he is not as inclined to leave now, because he's still getting, as you said, the hunger for new technology, and we're able to feed that hunger.
Very, very interesting answer. It's the first time I hear this. I'll tell you, and then we can maybe continue on that topic a bit. Most of the time I hear from people in enterprises say, if we want to make this work, the only way to make it work if we start from our dev side in the company. Meaning, if we can leverage IT professionals or infrastructure professionals starting these type of designs, development can take advantage of it because they want to move fast, they want to make it. So then we can grow into the next steps.
In my feeling, that's another rose-colored glass. This time we looked at from the dev side towards IT instead of the IT side towards dev, because both parties have that same argument. I've put out this infrastructure, you didn't spec it big enough for me, that's why your product sucks. Or on the opposite side, the dev guys are coming back saying, we wrote a really good piece of code, but the IT guys, well, they put it in the DMZ and they put it on slow storage and they didn't understand our requirements. So that's really both people throwing stones at each other without anybody actually sitting down, I think.
Well, that's why DevOps is people, process, and technology, right?
Without a question.
The people element of DevOps is probably the most important barrier to break down, and it can be done organically within teams, but it's also a top-down motion, which is about taking people who identify themselves as operations or infrastructure and people who identify themselves as developers, and throughout the entire life cycle, from plan to build to release to operate, those folks are involved. They're involved throughout the entire life cycle. And then you're building what it is that you decide. You're deciding what it is that you're going to build as a group. You're building what it is that you're going to build as a group, both the infrastructure that's code and the development, the actual application, which is code, or layering on a packaged product onto that. It doesn't always have to be something that you've built. It could be something that you've acquired from outside the organization. Sure. Yeah. You're releasing it together into the wild and then operating it together in the actual operational environment.
And that's the life cycle that's most important. But I think the typical thing we've seen historically is that, yes, the IT guys get pulled into that dev project earlier, but they're not engaged. They're sitting in that meeting, not listening until somebody turns around and says, oh, I need that server. Have you got that server ready for me? And then, yeah, I sent you a mail 2 days ago. Yes, your server's ready. And then he's gone back to sleep again, because we're not actually engaging in that whole process. Where in your scenario, Nathan, as part of that DevOps thing, this is an active participation at all points in time, and it's not just a server. I'm actually looking at the services that you're writing, figuring out, we should run that in a service fabric, or we should be architecting it slightly different, because now I've realized what you're doing doesn't really fit the old model of a cluster and a failover. It's actually much better to be active, and maybe I can go hybrid. And it's when we start engaging, then I think that's when that IT, DevOps whole word comes together, because the IT guy doesn't actually need to know how to code, and the DevOps guy does not need to know how to write a firewall route. We just need to know how to communicate with each other and understand what our requirements are for the final destination.
So what you're describing there, Damian, is we should find some kind of way of break down those IT silos, right?
Gone.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, what I see a lot is that people are so, I wouldn't call it self-centric, but they're afraid, right? They're afraid of that big word that starts with a C. It's called change, right? They're so afraid of it, and that they are not they're just focusing on having their stuff. Like you mentioned, oh, this is my network. Oh, here's my storage. You don't go there. This is mine, right? Instead of saying, hey, Nathan, you know what? You want to run something? Cool. Come over here. Let's sit down. Let's talk. I'll listen with those two things that someone up there gave me, and I'll try to understand what you're saying, and you do the same back, right? Then we have a communication. And I think that is the biggest thing they are missing out there, right? People are talking, but they're not listening. They're listening to one another, and then you end up in that meeting, like half asleep, until the dev guy says, hey, Damian, do you have that server for me? Whoops. Yeah, of course.
That's not DevOps, exactly. That's.
But you know, yeah, I think we also need to look at it from the point of view from these people, right? What we're doing in IT lately, the last 10, 15 years, and going extremely fast now the last 3 years, and probably even going faster the next few years, is we're going through a cycle which the industry did 100 and 150 years ago. From being all different silos, they suddenly start to get connected till, you know, I'm certainly not a historic guy on industry, but at the point in time, what we see now is a whole chain from where something is created, how the resources get there, something created goes to warehouses. It's a whole full chain all working together. We as an industry are doing the same thing at this point in time, only that fast.
Sure. I mean,
It's
to a certain extent,
line.
you know, throughout any technological advancement, there's always going to be a guy who's going to be like, oh man, like, I bet you when they invented the wheel, there's some guy who's got, oh man, that's going to ruin everything. Like,
Yeah.
you know, this is,
It's a wheel, man.
who needs a wheel, right? This square works just fine.
But one thing that I see that lacks a lot out there is people are, of course, focusing more on the dollars and on the quality, right? People are, you know, because it's business, right? It's business. You want to earn money, right? But if you look at the, you know, the fact that if you start developing code with high quality and fabric services that can support that code, right, with high quality, you will be beneficial, right?
Right.
Well, I'll give you an
However,
example.
there's an argument on that one though, because obviously you can't fall out of alignment of the reason you exist in the first place. You are a utility to the company that you're working for, and you're a utility to make sure that you're delivering a service that helps give us ultimately the final product that the company is delivering.
And that's the reinvention.
And that is really what it's about. If we don't focus at that point, yes, of course, the whole thing about DevOps is don't take big bites. Let's do small things and get it out today, another small thing tomorrow, and not wait to deliver a build in 3 weeks' time, then realize it takes half a day to deploy it and another 2 days to fix all the side effects of that deployment. And that's what we're trying to get to in this whole DevOps world. But if we distract ourselves from what the business objectives are, then we might as well not try.
I mean, DevOps is all about serving the business objectives, right?
Absolutely, it has to.
And the technologies that support it and the process that supports it is intended to be able to spin the wheel of release faster and faster, right? So that when something is broken, that release to get the new thing out to production, to bring value to the customers more rapidly, is enabled because of the efficiencies that are brought about as a result of the cloud.
Agreed. But the one thing that's probably missing is that I've been asked, Damian, where's my server? What's it for? I don't care. It's just a server. I'm not actually involved in what my business objective goal is. So the dev guy is writing a project that he was saying, we need this for the business reasons. The IT guy is just giving you a box to support the project and cares that. We're not engaged. And until we have that vision and we basically become part of that trust circle and engage into that trust circle of, I care what the business objectives are because I'm going to make this business money, and as a result, I'm going to get a bonus at the end for helping the rest of our teams to make this happen.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking, Damon, or what you're saying there is that all the things you now mentioned, I think those things, those arguments are very valid, right? First things out, they're very valid, they're genuine, they're real, right? But they are, what you're describing from what I hear is quality. Because when you get that all together, all the team together, all the engagement together, you start to do quality work, right?
Yeah, but I think one of the things that's got lost, my previous job, I'm 20 years as an IT pro in the company I work for, but before that, I worked in a manufacturing company that made rubber parts to rub around windows of cars. And my role in that was essentially making sure that I knew that the machine pressing that rubber was working and was working fast and making quality products in an ongoing cycle. But everybody else across that whole production line had tasks. Take the rubber out of the machine, make sure there's no faults in it, put it around the glass, make sure it's sealed, put it in a cage, move the cage over so it's ready for shipping, put it in a container, send it off to the customer, and make sure that there's no quality issues on the way back. Every single person in that organization knew what we were here to do. There was no question if I was IT, sales, or workflow engineers, we all knew ultimately that's what I'm making, this is what I'm putting in to make sure that happens on time. In the world that we live in today in IT, and certainly in these large enterprises, give me a box. Why? It's not irrelevant. Just get me the box. I need disk. Why? Because I have to put a database on it and I want the fastest disk you can give me. Why? We don't get the context. We don't want the context. And without that I think is ultimately, without that buy-in, DevOps can never work for the IT guys or for the dev guys, because we don't know what the business is doing, so we don't actually know what we're actually delivering at the end of the day to make that business successful.
That's sort of the point of the early on relationship between a person who's the cloud infrastructure architect, not necessarily delivering infrastructure. You may not have a data center, right?
Correct.
You might be provisioning something within Azure, but they're participating with the development team to help make sure that what is provisioned is going to perform properly. I think the concern that I'm hearing from you, and this is a very common concern, is from especially from the operations side, is the idea that yes, we can release things really, really quickly, but my customers are looking for quality and they're looking for confidence. How do I continue to provide confidence to my customers when I'm releasing at a daily basis potentially, right? Like Microsoft, they release many of their products on a daily basis. A lot of my customers, they release on a daily basis. And that confidence has to be coupled to that cadence. Otherwise, your customers' confidence in your organization will fail, right? So this whole transition about people's jobs being really reinvented is something that they need to take control of and look at.
And people need to be ready for that reinvention. If they're not engaged in it, then really they don't fit into that DevOps world. They've got to be ready for it.
Let me ask you a question. Like, how do you feel, kind of the four of us, like, how do you feel that we can take IT professionals that in some cases are feeling disengaged and sometimes are feeling that the application development team is literally going around them because they've really felt that, often these development teams have felt that IT is an impediment to their success, and they're building out their own infrastructures in the cloud. How do you feel like you're encouraging them to get involved in reinventing their careers and engaging within the cloud? Or
it has to be through education. It has to be within the problem, and I think Mike nailed it a little bit earlier on. The IT guy is so engrossed in his day-to-day firefighting or whatever it is he's dealing with, he's not taking any attention to what's happening around him in the bigger picture. And he definitely hasn't got the time to start learning what it is the technologies are out there that can help him. Yeah, sure, you told me 6 years ago I needed to learn PowerShell. Well, guess what? There's still a web interface in Exchange and I can still manage the mailboxes, so I've lived without it. And that's somewhat of the mentality of some of the people that we now need to say, that was step one. You haven't engaged to get to step one. We're now on step 2 and step 3 of this journey, and you're already a foot behind. So it hasn't really impeded you too much because you haven't got a bigger picture, but now stand back and take a bigger picture. And I think the way we help them with that is by going to these conferences, or is by doing internal training and running sessions to say, okay lads, Azure, let's take a look at automation. What is it? How does it work? And spend a half an hour just walking through the interfaces, showing them one single scenario that we can automate, and then take that and record how long it took to do, and even help them with something like a dollar amount. Just make a quick number to say, your average salary, let's just say for argument's sake, is $100 an hour. I've got this repetitive task that I need you to do every day. It's going to take you 6 minutes checking the health of Active Directory. So you run a set of different processes and whatever the case may be. Now I'm going to automate that for you, and I'm going to write a set of scripts whose job essentially is to do those same checks. Now it's going to take me 8 hours to write that script, and that's $800. At $100 an hour to do my writing. Now tomorrow I'm going to actually run that script. And now I've basically saved 6 minutes of your life which we convert that into dollars, is about $5. $5 worth of your salary. Now I run that over a period of a week. Now I've saved $25 and I keep rolling out. Before long, we're in a scenario where we've essentially showing the IT guys that automation helps them, that they're going to save money. Money ultimately means things like bonuses or hiring more people into their teams. And all of a sudden, they start to be able to consider the new methodologies of enhancing the way they do work.
That's probably the most important thing we can do. But I still feel, and I think that is the big gap as of today, is that there's that top-down level that management needs to get education on it as well. Yeah. And they need to bring it as well, because today the only thing they hear is all these buzzwords and how great it is and how much money and they come in the office and they say, we're going to use the cloud. How? They don't know. They just hear the buzzword and they saw the dollars. But so the day we can educate the C-level, unfortunately that's, I don't think, up to us. Well, you can do it in your own company, but that day when they get it and when they push down those things, like you said, baby steps, why not? That's the day we win, I think.
The thing I also want to put into the discussion is that, I think we discussed this earlier, or just mentioned it, that I don't believe that there is a good way of optimizing that is already there. I think it's better to start fresh, like building a new concept and have everyone on board from the beginning, right? And start having conversations, be engaged, have, as you mentioned, Damon, have the time to engage in that, because I believe that if you as a manager reach out to your employee and says, hey guys, you know what, I'm going to give you 8 hours per week to engage in this. How you do it, it's up to you. I want to see some result maybe within a month, but show me some result. Then people may be engaged, right? They maybe see the opportunity that lies in front of them, being able to adopt PowerShell or DevOps or build a fabric that is, from the beginning, they understand it, right? And start building concepts around that.
It's a good idea. It's a greenfield idea, right? But in the end, it's not that simple, and many businesses won't be doing that.
I'd never said it was simple.
Well, nothing is simple in life,
No.
I guess.
No.
Well, there's something else. You mentioned something, all right? Greenfield, and this is a big fear as well. And to be honest, sorry Microsoft, but this is completely the fault of mine. I'm actually thinking now we're going to see a dip into cloud usage, because we've been talking about it with the classic model. And suddenly there's resource manager, and yes, I agree, it's way better. But then they came, now we have resource manager, everything has a code. Oh, by the way, everything you already built in classic model, you can't convert it unless you bring it down and do some scripting on top of it. That's not good for the trust in these technologies.
Yeah.
People are literally going to say, okay, we did it, we start moving, and now we're basically screwed. We have to start over again. That's really not good for the trust.
I think the data will show that there's not going to be a dip in cloud usage. I mean, the customers that we're working with, I think what we've seen over the last 3 years is, a couple years ago, we saw a lot of this in its infancy. A lot of, especially in Microsoft's ecosystem, PaaS was the main thing that people were starting to play with. And then infrastructure as a service, virtual machines came out with the, services model. And then ARM became the principal way of provisioning resources. And you're right, there's not a way to, to simply convert them from one to the other at this point. Although I think there's potentially some things happening with that. What I've seen is that most of our customers are now full speed ahead on the cloud, and even the service provider customers that we're working with that account for huge amounts of data center, huge 20, 40, 60 of on-premise data centers per service provider customer. They're looking to use the cloud as well in their business because they know that that's what their customers are asking for. Their customers are asking for that. And so the cloud consumption, the way in which you provision has changed, but that's a component of the DevOps model as well, right? Is that Microsoft has understood that they need to adapt the way that provisioning occurs, and they need to continue to evolve it so that way provisioning can become more declarative, and they can allow for provisioning to be part of a DevOps model that allows for the speed of provisioning to occur faster and faster with higher confidence. And there's going to be change that happens, but I think we'll find that especially this year, more and more customers are going to be seriously looking at moving to the cloud, or as Robert said, they could be doing greenfield and they're moving their applications from scratch to the cloud. We have a lot of customers that are building straight up in PaaS. Like, they're not even using like the whole like, oh, get me a server. Like that's not even relevant anymore. Like they're like, look, I'm going to build a PaaS application that's able to build for unlimited scale, and my infrastructure guy needs to be able to understand that ecosystem, which is a whole other thing to think about.
But from the perspective, when I was talking earlier regarding the greenfield thingy, was if you do that, you engage, you will engage people, right? That was the main purpose of it. Moving your stuff from the data center you have into, migrate that to a new environment. Of course, that's tough. There's a load of work doing that, of course. But as you were mentioning, doing the greenfield approach, you will engage trust, and you will, have more engagement. And I think that as a person, you will be more happy, go to work, talk to your colleagues, talk to your DevOps, and all that stuff.
Totally.
Without a question.
That's a solid 40 minutes.
Boom.
Oh, that was good.
I didn't know it.
Yeah.
We were that long busy.
This was a good discussion.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
Now let's go
to a wrap up. No.
Let's go to the bar, continue, and then make it fight.